The playground in Maplebrook buzzed with life that spring afternoon. Children's laughter echoed across the field swings, creaked, and the air was filled with the carefree rhythm of sneakers pounding the dirt. To anyone passing by, it looked like the perfect day. Parents stood in clusters chatting under the soft glow of the sun. But Officer Michael Turner wasn't smiling. Leaning against his cruiser arms, crossed his eyes, scanned the playground. Beside him, his K9 partner Shadow, a sharp-eyed German Shepherd, sat perfectly still, too still. Michael had worked with Shadow long enough to know the difference between calm and alert. This wasn't calm. This was something else. A low growl rumbled in Shadow's chest. His ears twitched, his nose pointed toward the far abandoned corner of the playground, where weeds grew wild around broken benches. Children paused mid-play, staring. Easy boy Michael muttered, tightening his grip on the leash. But Shadow pulled harder, body rigid, eyes locked on the forgotten ground. Parents turned, their smiles fading. Then Shadow barked loud, sharp, urgent. The sound froze the playground. Michael's heart kicked. He unclipped the leash. Shadow bolted toward the corner, claws tearing into the dirt. Seconds later, the ground gave up its first secret. Something small, faded and pink. A child's shoe. The playground fell silent, parents pulling their children close as Officer Michael Turner crouched near the small pink sneaker. It was dirty, the laces frayed, but unmistakable. His chest tightened. He'd seen this before. Shadow barked again, digging harder, his paws tearing up the earth with frantic urgency. Michael grabbed his radio. "This is Turner. I need backup at Maplebrook Park. Possible evidence related to a missing child." His voice cracked slightly as he spoke. The name whispered among the parents spread like wildfire: Hannah Miller. 10 years ago, she had vanished from this very playground. Just 6 years old, last seen wearing pink sneakers and denim overalls. The town of Maplebrook had searched for weeks, posters plastered on every pole, her mother's desperate pleas broadcast on the evening news. But nothing was ever found. Until now. An hour later, the crowd parted as Laura Miller, Hannah's mother, arrived. Her hands clutched a worn photograph, edges frayed from years of being carried everywhere. Her face was pale eyes hollowed by grief that had never healed. When her gaze fell on the shoe, Laura's knees buckled. She cried out raw and broken, collapsing onto the dirt. "Hannah?" she whispered over and over, clutching the tiny sneaker as if it were her child herself. Shadow stepped forward, lowering his head against her trembling arm. For the first time in a decade, hope and fear flooded back into Maplebrook. The following morning, the playground was cordoned off with yellow police tape. The cheerful sounds of children were gone, replaced by the hum of radios and the crunch of boots on gravel. Officer Michael Turner stood at the edge of the old play area, Shadow straining at his leash. The German Shepherd's nose twitched, his amber eyes locked on the far corner of the forgotten field. "Go on, boy," Michael whispered, unclipping the leash. Shadow bolted his paws, tearing into the dry earth with feverish urgency. Within seconds, he began digging again, his barks echoing across the empty park. Officers rushed over just as the dog unearthed a small metal tin, its surface rusted and damp. Michael's hands shook as he pried it open. Inside lay fragments of a little girl's life, a pink hair ribbon, crayon drawings, a button from denim overalls, and a folded note smudged with dirt. The room fell silent as the evidence spoke louder than words. Laura Miller stood nearby, her hands clutched to her chest. When she saw the ribbon, her voice broke. That was hers. She wore it every Sunday, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. For a decade, Maplebrook had lived in painful silence. Now each discovery ripped open wounds, but also pulled the town closer to the truth. Parents whispered in fear, old suspicions resurfacing about neighbors, teachers, even strangers, who had once lingered too close to the playground. Shadow barked again, circling his body rigid. Michael felt a chill crawl down his spine. The dog wasn't finished. Something darker was still hidden beneath the soil. The search had only just begun. Detectives returned to the playground the next day, determined to follow Ranger's lead. Once again, the German Shepherd barked insistently at another patch of dry earth. This time, as officers dug, they unearthed a small tin box. Inside were Hannah Miller's belongings, crayon drawings, a hair ribbon, and a button from her overalls. Each item was a frozen piece of her childhood, carefully hidden, as though someone had wanted to preserve her memory while erasing her presence. For Laura Miller, Hannah's mother, the discovery was devastating. She clutched the tiny ribbon in her trembling hands, whispering Hannah's name through tears. The town of Maplewood was shaken to its core. Old suspicions resurfaced. Neighbors cast uneasy glances at one another, and whispers grew into rumors. Every stranger, every familiar face seemed capable of cruelty. But Officer Michael Turner refused to give up. Guided by Ranger's instincts, he returned day after day, uncovering more fragments of Hannah's life. A bracelet, a torn piece of denim with her initials stitched inside, and finally the breakthrough DNA on one of the objects. The evidence pointed to a man who had once lived only blocks away, Richard Hale. Richard Hale had lived quietly in Maplewood before moving away a year after Hannah vanished. On the surface, he was ordinary, no criminal record, no history of violence. But when investigators confronted him with the evidence, his composure crumbled. At first, he denied everything. Then, under relentless questioning, the truth spilled out. He confessed. Richard admitted he had lured Hannah away from the playground that day. He admitted to burying her belongings beneath the very soil where she had last been seen. It was his twisted attempt to mislead the town to keep suspicion scattered while he slipped away. The courtroom would later hear every chilling detail, each word slicing through the silence of a community that had waited a decade for answers. For Laura Miller, the confession was a dagger to the heart, yet it also brought a form of closure she had long been denied. After years of waking each morning with unanswered questions, she finally knew what had happened to Hannah. Though justice came late, it allowed her to grieve fully. And for Maplewood, it was a reminder that evil can hide in plain sight, but so can heroes. The town of Maplewood never forgot the shock they had endured. Yet, out of that darkness, they chose to build something that carried the power of healing. The very place where Hannah Miller had once vanished was transformed into a new playground, bright, colorful, and safer than ever before. At its entrance stood a memorial plaque. Hannah's name was etched deeply into the metal, right beside the imprint of Shadow's paw, the K9, who had unearthed the truth from the ground itself. It was more than just a plaque. It was a reminder to the entire town, no truth can remain buried forever. Officer Michael Ward often returned to that spot, Shadow faithfully by his side. He would sit quietly watching the children laugh and run freely once more. His chest still carried the weight of loss, but for the first time in years, he felt peace. Justice had finally arrived. Hannah could rest. And with Shadow beside him, Michael knew one truth would always remain. Sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear badges. They walk on four legs carrying loyalty and love in their hearts. In the end, the rescue of Hannah Miller became more than a moment of justice. It became a testament to loyalty, perseverance, and the healing power of love. Shadow the K9, who refused to look away, reminded everyone that sometimes truth is revealed not through technology or authority, but through instinct, trust, and determination. For Officer Michael Ward, the journey taught him that healing is possible even in the face of tragedy, and that closure can come when courage refuses to give up. For the people of Maplewood, it was a reminder to never ignore the quiet warnings of intuition, no matter how small. Life often places obstacles in our path, some hidden, some painful. But the story of Shadow and Hannah reminds us that persistence uncovers truth. Love conquers fear, and that hope, even buried for years, can always rise again.